right now here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline with 97.3 ESPN.com Sixers insider Paul Hudrick. Here he is on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline on a Monday. What's going on, Paul?
Just living the dream, Mike. You know me, man.
Yeah, man. Well, hey, Friday night they took care of business. Sunday they didn't have to play anybody. There was a little panic on Thursday after they lost to the Heat. Now you know you won't have to face the Heat or the Bucks. One of those two teams will be gone. So how do you think the weekend in general kind of played out perfectly for the Sixers, right?
Yeah, for sure. And Mike, I think if you've been following along, we all felt this. Like the Orlando Magic, the Sixers beat them yesterday with the Bluecoats, Bluecoats plus Tyrese Maxey yesterday. So I mean, it was you kind of saw this coming on Friday. It should have been an easy victory, as we talked about previously. If they had lost both of those games to the Magic, or really one of them even, that would have been a much greater cause for concern than anything that has transpired at any point in this season. But they didn't. They took care of business Friday. They did what they had to do. They blew a bad team out. And then Sunday was just fun. It was just fun to watch somebody, Maxey's rookie season, man. It is funny to think about. I saw the stat that I think only him, LaMelo Ball, and Anthony Edwards were the only rookies with like multiple 30-point games this season. And it's crazy to think about how good maybe he would be on a bad team. Like how many, what kind of numbers would he put up if he was playing on a bad team all season long? And the fact that he could be a possible rotation player, maybe not rotation, but I think it's pretty likely that he will see playoff minutes at some point. So I think it's just, you're glad to see Friday. They took care of business. They did what they had to do. And then, like I said, Sunday was just fun to see the young guys. And the other thing, Mike, and I tweeted this out, and everyone kind of hopped all over it. They really crushed the draft this year. To get Maxey, Isaiah Joe, and Paul Reed, three guys that I think, as of now, have to factor into the future. That's a pretty damn good haul.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I just got done talking about that, how this is a team that perpetually lost purposely. I say they hit a grand slam home run without winning a championship. If they win a championship, you can't predict that. This process was about finding a MVP player. You have to have that guy. If they win, that's cherry on top. But what they set out to do was to get a player that, like Joel Embiid, that could be the MVP of the league that you can win a title with. But that being said, as a team that has been in the playoffs and been a 50-win team and had some success, they have been able to stock their roster with some nice role players. I said, like maybe Isaiah Joe replaces Furkan Korkmaz at one point. But you need those players through an 82-game season. And Maxey's an interesting one because if I'm Doc Rivers and I'm watching what he does, I'm thinking to myself, do I have to find a way to get him on the court in these playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at Joe and Paul Reed, it's like, the future. But for Tyrese Maxey, the future might be a week from now. He might help them out. To me, I don't know that Doc Rivers is thinking this way. I have no idea where Doc Rivers is going to go with the rotation. We've talked about that before, that I have no clue in which direction he's going to go. But this kid it's a skill set that they haven't had at any point during the Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons era. It's a skill set that no one on this current roster other than Tyrese Maxey has, and it's just that ability to take people off the dribble and get to the rim. That's something that it's a big element that has been missing from this offense for years, and he provides it. So if I'm Doc Rivers, I absolutely would be tempted to play him. Because here's the other thing too, Mike. As the season has gone on, he's gotten better with the three ball. Listen, he's not elite, but he's gotten better with the three balls as the season's gone on.
I think he was 3 or 4 yesterday.
Exactly. And and I think if you look over the last month or so, he's above league average. So I mean, he has hit them pretty well. And then defensively, he's not a liability. He's pretty darn good, actually. Again, all things considered, as a 20-year-old rookie, like if I'm being honest, do I trust him or Furkan Korkmaz defensively? I trust Maxey more because Maxey has the athleticism and the length and the lateral quickness to hang with some of these guys. So if I were Doc Rivers, I would be really, really tempted to play this kid. And the other issue is the roster is just kind of they're actually pretty good at guard. You know what I mean? I mean, they have Danny Green and Seth Curry in the starting lineup. You have a George Hill now. You have Shake Milton. You have Matisse Thybulle, who's like guard forward. You have Korkmaz. So you have all these other guys. So it's also just tough because of the competition. On a lesser playoff team, even he might have a chance. But Mike, I look at too, like last year, Tyler Hero came out of nowhere
Yeah.
20-year-old rookie out of Kentucky, picking the teens. No one expected him to make the impact he did on a team that went to the finals. So you never know. I think that Maxey will get a chance. He'll play at some point, but I don't know how long. But if I were Doc Rivers, I would be very tempted to keep him around.
I just wrote down here because sometimes I have questions that pop in my head, then I forget. But playing time at the expense of who, though? If Maxey's getting more minutes and you're saying, hey, they got to find him time at the expense of who?
Well, so as we kind of touched on the starting lineup, I mean, you have three guys that are going to be playing big minutes with Embiid, with Simmons, and Harris. So that's it, right? I mean, that's a big chunk of it. And Simmons is he is, Doc Rivers doesn't want to call him that. He's the point guard. Let's just get that out there. He is the point guard of this team. So that's it's 38 minutes of essentially one position there. You have George Hill. You didn't trade for George Hill to have him sit on the bench. You traded for George Hill because you liked him as a veteran presence, as his defense. And I think that's why you could listen. I understand an argument if you want to make it possibly for Maxey over Shake Milton. But what I would say with Shake Milton is the shot. Shake Milton's been over 40% since in the second half of the season, and he's a proven commodity as a shooter throughout his NBA career. And defensively, as much as I just praised Maxey's defense, I trust Shake Milton more defensively with the concepts, just knowing where he needs to be, and handling more veteran kind of offensive players. And he's bigger. He's 6'6", he's got long arms. So I would say that would maybe be your debate, would be Maxey versus Milton. But that would probably be where it ends, is the fact defensively, I think Milton just gives you more, and he just spreads the floor better. Because, yes, Maxey's improved, but he's not quite there with the shot where he's spacing the floor appropriately when Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid out there, or when Dwight Howard's out there with the second unit.
Paul Hudrick's with us at Paul Hudrick on Twitter. Is this team in win now? Like, they have to win? Like, is the window like, hey, it's here, we got to do this? I mean, Danny Green's not going to be here probably. Dwight Howard's 35. He's probably been the best backup that they've had for Joel Embiid. It's been a very sore spot for them over the last couple of years. Does this season feel like, hey, this is your one shot with this roster to do it? Because after this, I don't know if Dwight Howard's future is going to be. I don't know what Danny Green's future is going to be. But does this feel like if you don't do it this year, it's a disappointment?
The simple answer is no. And it's kind of some of the stuff we've already touched on. The one thing is the whole thing with the process, like you talked about. The idea was not just to get a championship. The idea was to get superstars, was to get young MVP, high-level, all-star type of players. The Sixers have done that. They got Joel Embiid. They got Ben Simmons. And they're not going anywhere. They're signed. And, I'm sure when Joel Embiid, when that opportunity comes to get the next Supermax, I'm sure they're going to lock him up. And I'm sure he's going to want to stay here. I don't think he's going to want to go anywhere. So you have that. You already have Ben Simmons locked up. You have Tobias Harris locked up. If you have, first of all, just to start, you have those three guys, you got a shot. If you put the right pieces around them, you have a chance to win every single season. And again, that's what the process was about. It was about maintaining a winning team, not just trying to go all in for one season. It was about a team that has, a bunch of bites of the apples. Because like you said, too, as well, it's not easy. It is not easy to win. You need to keep coming at it. You need to be consistently good. And in 1 year, you break through. And another thing we touched on, all the young guys they have. You're right. They might lose Danny Green just because, with salary cap and, with luxury tax, there's a good chance that Danny Green, especially if he plays well in the playoffs, he might get a good offer to go somewhere else and kind of go out of the Sixers price range. Well, guess what? You put Matisse Thybulle in the starting lineup. You let him know this is, offensively, you need to come back. You need to shoot the ball at a high level, not high level, but a decent level. And you need to do things off the ball, and you need to move, you need to make sure you are intact. You have everything coordinated with spacing, and you give him a crack at the starting lineup if you can't retain Danny Green. Dwight Howard's on the minimum this year. I don't see why you couldn't just bring him back for the minimum next year. If not, Paul Reed. Maybe Paul Reed's an option next year because, Doc Rivers said he wasn't quite ready this year, but maybe he's ready next year. Shake Milton's another year older. Tyrese Maxey's another year older. Isaiah Joe, like you said, he could be a factor next year because I think he can shoot the ball at a high level. We all know that, but I think he's better defensively than any of us, including Doc Rivers, even thought he was going to be. He's pretty good.
Yeah.
So he's got a legitimate shot to be a 3-and-D wing rotational player next season, I think. So for all those reasons, I don't think it is a win now thing. Of course, they can win now. That would be great. But I think that if they don't win this year, it's not this huge disappointment because I think next year they're going to have another crack at it.
All right, Paul, do you think this team feels slighted?
Yeah, I think they absolutely do.
They're the number 1 seed.
Yeah.
Nobody talks about them.
Right. And I think that's kind of been their thing all year. Joel Embiid felt slighted because he didn't make any of the All-NBA teams last year. Ben Simmons, of course, feels slighted because all anyone wants to do is talk about his jump shot. Tobias Harris, all-star snub. Seth Curry traded away from the Dallas Mavericks. Danny Green traded away from a team that he just won a championship with. So I think Dwight Howard, it goes on and on and on. All these guys, Tyrese Maxey slipped to 21 in the draft. Just all these players kind of have, I feel like, a chip and something to kind of play for. And I think it's galvanized them a little bit. And I had to give, it's so funny because I think one thing that I've learned about Doc Rivers is that he will absolutely tell you one thing and then do a completely different thing with his team. Like, I think he talks about a lot about like, we don't scoreboard watch. We're not paying attention to what you guys say, like whatever. I think there is a lot more. And, it came out a little bit in that ESPN article where he said to Ramona Shelburne, he told Joel Embiid, if you ever seen an MVP that's out of shape. So I think he props guys up to us, to the media, to everyone, to the fans. But when it's closed doors, when he's one-on-one with those guys, I think he's not afraid to say what he wants from those guys, what he needs from those guys. So I think that Doc Rivers uses a lot of this, a lot of, hey, Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, they can't play together. They can't win a championship together. Tobias Harris, that was a terrible trade. He makes way too much money. Like, I am never been more sure of anything in my life. So Doc Rivers uses all those little things and all those little slights to pump guys up and to try to give them a little bit of an edge. And I think that's the way to do it. We all watched The Last Dance and what it took Michael Jordan making stuff up to pump himself up. So I think that's all part of it. I do think they feel slighted, and I think that's part of the reason they won so many games and why they're the number 1 seed.
Couple things. The 4 possible teams they could play: Boston, Washington, Hornets, Pacers. Any of those a greater concern than the other? I mean, I'm sure, you're not as concerned about the Hornets but which team is the one that you're like, that one might be a problem?
Well, I would say Washington, but when I define problem, I don't mean problem as in they have a chance to lose. I define it in as they could win a couple games and make it a tough series, win a game or two, kind of like, reminiscent of maybe that Heat series from a couple of years ago when, the first year that they made the postseason again. And it was a 5-game series. The Sixers took care of business. They were the better team. But a couple of those games, they were knockout, dragout. They were tough games, tough physical games. And I could see a series against the Wizards, Russell Westbrook, the way he's playing, going 100 miles an hour. He's not going to concede anything. He's going to try to win. He doesn't care that they're the 10 seed, 9 seed, 8 seed. None of that matters to him. He just wants to win. And then Bradley Beal, who's Bradley Beal? I mean, we've seen what he's done to the Sixers over the year. The guy's, one of the best scorers in the entire NBA. And so, again, they would win that series, I think, and, probably take care of it in 4 or 5 games. But it would not be easy and it would not be fun. And I think that Westbrook and Beal would stretch their limits a little bit, especially defensively. In a weird way, though, Mike, maybe they need that to kind of get them kick-started, kind of get their juices flowing, kind of get that defensive identity back. But, yeah, that would be the team that if I'm looking at all 4 of those, I think Washington far and away is a team I wouldn't want to play.
Yeah, it's Washington, Boston, Charlotte, Indiana. Those games are tomorrow night. The winner is in. They would be the 7 seed. The loser would play the winner of the other game. So the winner of the Wizards-Celtics game, they are the 7 seed. So if Washington beats Boston, they would play Brooklyn in round 1, right? It would be Brooklyn-Washington. Well, they going to score 160 a night, those 2 teams?
Possibly. I'd be actually – and again, you know what? Kind of going off the same note for the Sixers, if you're Brooklyn, that's not the team you really want to play, especially if there are questions about your defense.
Sure.
Who's guarding Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal in that series? I mean, that's going to be a fun matchup. Again, Brooklyn will take care of business, but it would be fun to watch.
That would be nuts. I mean, you got Kevin Durant, James Harden, Kyrie Irving, Bradley Beal, and Russell Westbrook all on the floor at the same time.
Power.
Holy mackerel. Wizards, Brooklyn, sign me up for that. And that means Philly would get either Boston, Charlotte, or Indiana. So, obviously you would be a heavy favorite. And then your second round path, the Heat are the 6 seed. They will play Milwaukee in round 1, which means Philly would take on in round 2 either Atlanta or the Knicks. The Knicks are now the home court in that series, so does that give them the slight edge for you?
I would say yes, too, and I just think the brand of basketball that the Knicks play, that knockout, drag-out, 90s era basketball where I think that's the kind of basketball that generally win. Like, when you play it at an elite level, that kind of basketball can win in the playoffs if the talent is close. And I think the talent's close enough that I think that's where I would give the Knicks the slight edge. But I don't want to discount the Hawks either. I mean, Trae Young had, kind of quietly had a phenomenal year. And some of those veteran guys, man, they play tough. They play hard. And so I do think that could be a very tough series. I would give the slight edge to the Knicks just because of the way they play, the style they play, and the level of defense Thibodeau has them playing at.
Let me ask you this, Paul. It's late in the game because I see people texting in already. The Sixers are going to get exposed in the playoffs. Superstars win championships. Guys who can get buckets when the game's on the line. Defenses will take the ball out of the bigs' hands, and you need a wing player that can do it. Is there questions about that? If the team late in the game, it's 2-point game, and you need a bucket, and they're double, triple in Joel Embiid, can the Sixers get that late bucket?
It's certainly a concern. Yeah, absolutely. Tobias Harris has done a really nice job of that all season long, and that's kind of been one of my biggest question marks all season is will he be able to do that in the playoffs? And when the playoffs hit in the fourth quarter, he's been excellent this year, and he's done it in some big times and some big moments. He did it against the Lakers, hit a big shot to beat them at home. So will he be able to translate that to the playoffs? I think that's a huge part of it. And then, to your point, when Joel Embiid gets double and triple teamed, Joel Embiid has handled those situations much, 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 much better than he has in the past. So can he find a Danny Green wide open in the corner or Seth Curry on the wing or Ben Simmons in the dunker spot? Like, can he find those guys for those shots? So I think I'm less concerned about it than maybe I was in the past, but it's still a concern because they're going to aggressively take care of Joel Embiid. He's done better at that, but this is still the postseason. It's going to be a different animal.
Well, yeah, that's where the people will, if you're relying on Danny Green and Seth Curry to be your shot makers, is that a recipe for playoff success?
But I mean, guys hit big shot. I mean, John Paxson and Steve Kerr hit 2 of the biggest shots in NBA history. Like that's just because on a team with Michael Jordan, it's just, that's the way basketball is. Like you have to have 5 guys that can do stuff. So that's why, yes, having Danny Green and Seth Curry, especially Danny Green, who's hit a ton of big shots in his career, having guys like that where they do overly aggressively double and triple team Joel Embiid, so he has those outlets to do that. Yeah, I mean, that's the correct strategy if you're the opponent, but if you can, that's why those guys are here. That's why Daryl Morey brought them in. They are shooters. Yeah, they are meant to hit wide open shots. And guys have, like I said, throughout history, guys have done that.
Do you think Daryl Morey put this team together this year thinking they were an NBA Finals team? Or is this more like, hey, let me just get rid of these contracts and we'll go on from there, but let me get out from under the contracts first? Or when he did this was, you know what, this is a team that I think can do something? Or is this surprising to them?
I guess the simple answer is I don't think he went in thinking championship or bust. I'm trying to win a championship this year. What I think his main thought was, and this is what I've applauded him for all season long, because I think this is the right way to do it. What do I do to best build around Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons? What do I do to best build around the 2 all-stars and their strengths and weaknesses? And the first solution was they need shooters. You can't have a 6'10" Al Horford playing power forward for you. You can't have Josh Richardson, who is a below-average three-point shooter and who's really not that willing to take three-pointers. So let's flip those guys and let's turn them into the second-best three-point shooter in NBA history in Seth Curry, and then one of the best corner three-point shooter right now in the NBA in Danny Green. And so I think that was what the bigger thought was. Let's do that, and then let's see what these guys can do under Doc Rivers with a new coach. And with these shooters and with a team that's better suits their needs, how can we go forward? And I think he wanted to take a look at that before it was any kind of sweeping declarations or any kind of grand conclusions that they drew. So that to me has been the focus all along. And I think that's, even if they don't win the championship this year, I still think this offseason it still will be about What do I do to best complement Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons?
Well, yeah, the fact that Morey's here now for particularly a longer haul, these all-season are going to be very intriguing if they fail to see, okay, we failed. This is why we failed. This is what I'm going to do to fix that. That is great to have him on your side. Let me ask you this. We'll leave you with this, Paul. And Paul will be back Wednesday, Friday, of course, to take a look closer at some of the matchup possibilities and more Sixers as they get ready for the first seed for the first time in 20 years. How do you envision teams defending Ben Simmons in the playoffs? Differently than we saw for 72 games? Similar? Does the roster around him now prevent teams from kind of sagging off like we've seen in the past? How do you envision teams defending Ben Simmons?
So it's going to be similar. I mean, they're going to put bigger players on him, and they're going to give him space. I mean, that's been kind of the formula that's worked for most teams in defending him. And I think part of the reason I think he is going to be better in the playoffs is because Joel Embiid is better. Because when Joel Embiid gets double teamed, typically Ben Simmons' guy is the guy that's doing it for obvious reasons. So I think Ben Simmons has gotten better as a cutter and knowing and where to be and how to get there. And I think Joel Embiid has done better at finding him, seeing him come open and kind of manipulating the defenses that way. And I think that's the thing that I'm kind of most encouraged about and where I see the biggest improvement for the Sixers as a team in the playoffs offensively is that Joel Embiid has just gotten so good where he's at a point where not only is he not scared of double teams, he's inviting them and he's ready for them and he's scanning the entire court. And he's almost, I think, the one thing Drew Hanlon, who is his personal trainer, said in that article, he said he's not prepping to play against a player. He's prepping to play against an entire team. And I think that's been one of the biggest things of his development. And that's one of the biggest reasons why I think Ben Simmons will be better and why I think the Sixers offense will be better as a whole, because Joel Embiid has figured out how to handle those situations better.
That should be interesting. A lot of people feel, all right, they're just going to sag off and they're going to make Ben try to do what he hasn't been able to do in past playoff rounds. So we'll see how teams end up defending him. That'll be a big story. And, of course, how teams defend Joel Embiid, especially later on in games. And can the Sixers use the same formula that they used in the regular season where they won 49 games and became the number one seed in the East? They will play probably Saturday, Paul?
That's what it seems like. We'll see, though. But, yeah, it seems like Saturday would make the most sense.
Yeah, the play-in Eastern Conference games are Tuesday, Thursday. So you'll have an opponent by Thursday night, and you would think that they would play that game on Saturday, maybe Sunday, who knows. But it'll either be Saturday or Sunday. We'll have more details as this week goes on. He is Paul Hudrick, at Paul Hudrick. And, of course, you can read all his Sixers coverage for the NBA playoffs at 973ESPN.com. All right, Paul, good stuff, bud.
All right, Mike, take care, man.
And he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. We always enjoy talking to Paul Hudrick.